149, 109, 88, 85. Well, cheapest seems to be about 69. Why are AIOs all so expensive? I wonder if they're cheaper in China. Okay, English to Chinese simplified. Water cooling. Dismiss. Copy 240 and paste. Enter. Yo. That is a lot cheaper. You, my friend, look interesting. I think I'm gonna give this guy a shot. Welcome to part 2 of 3 budget AIO coolers that I'm taking a look at from China as part of my TFTE series. So I was surfing around Taobao, a Chinese e-commerce website, the other day, and out of curiosity, I started looking at AIO coolers thinking, how cheap exactly can you get an AIO cooler from China? And more importantly, how well does it perform? Well, I plugged in what I needed to into Google Translate because unfortunately, despite being Chinese, my Chinese is pretty bad, and I came up with this cooler here from Segotep. Now it goes by a different name in China, but its official name in English is the WC Halo 240BL for blue, and I got it for $39 US. Yes, $39 US. That's pretty cheap for a 240mm AIO. So let's see how far your dollar goes at this price point. Going straight into the specs, Segotep lists a speed of about 2,800 RPM for the pump head, has a fluid dynamic bearing, and operates at less than 25 decibels. It has compatibility with pretty much every Intel and AMD socket out there, including the new AMD AM4 socket, but unfortunately, we don't get any numbers on the pump's water flow. The pump head lights up blue when powered on, but isn't the most stylish looking pump head, unfortunately. But if you can live with that, that's okay. The tubes can only be oriented coming out from the top or bottom of the pump head, which might have issues with clearance. And I don't know why they did it this way, but the power cable for the pump head comes out right in the top center of the pump head, making it just a little bit of an eyesore. I would have liked it if they maybe put it lower, closer to the mount, or perhaps off to the sides, coming out in the same sides as the tubes. No sleeved tubing unfortunately, but they're anti-aging high temperature rubber tubes. And well, they still look better than those ribbed FEB tubes in my opinion. They're a lot softer than rubber tubings that I'm used to, and they can kink, but only if you purposefully went and kinked the tubes. Segotep is really weird with some of their details, where they list that this AIO's radiator has a thickness of 25mm on their website, placing them side by side with other coolers that I have lying around reveal that they're actually 27mm. So it's kinda weird that Segotep would go and screw themselves like this by marketing it lower than it actually is. Anyway, moving on to the fans, they honestly look quite basic out of the box without even any branding in the center. They've got a 7-blade design made out of translucent black plastic, and they've got rubber dampeners on each corner of the frame to reduce any vibration noises that might have transferred from the fan. Now, I don't usually talk about fan connectors because there's nothing really much to say about them, but in this case they're interesting, but not necessarily in a good way. Now, usually on a 4-pin connector there's a notch that helps you align the pump head correctly if putting it onto a 3-pin header, but this one doesn't have it, so that's really something to keep in mind as you don't want to plug your fans in wrongly if you're using a 3-pin header. If unsure, the pins should always go in from the leftmost side. Speaking of basic, they kinda lose that notion when you turn on the fans, as you get this really cool looking halo blue effect around the frame that can not just be seen on the inner frame but also the outer ones, illuminating the fans really nicely. Specs-wise, they have an operation speed of 800 to 1800 RPM with a surprisingly low CFM of 56 CFM and a max static pressure of 2.2mm H2O. They're surprisingly honest as well with the noise levels, as they're listing them less than 31 decibels. As usual, talking about noise, let's have a listen at how much noise they make, starting with the pump head. Pretty much inaudible, just the way I like it, so let's move on to the fans. Honestly, not too bad. I found that the noise made by the fans seemed to be the low humming type of noise, which makes them near inaudible in operation, which is great. What about airflow though? Based on the data I collected, they pushed a fair amount of air at 4.7 meters per second unobstructed and 2.4 meters of air once resistance in the form of a radiator was introduced. Once pumped with lower voltages, surprisingly they run the slowest by a very large margin at only 1.9 meters per second. Based on these findings, because they're so inaudible, and given their lower than average performance at lower voltages, you're better off tuning your fans at higher voltages / RPMs, as it gives you better performance with no discernible difference in noise levels. Alrighty then, so now that we've run through the basic specs and tests, let's get it installed and get some benchmark results. This one was a relatively surprising installation, as it's pretty much the first AIO installation that I've encountered on Ryzen that uses the existing mounting brackets rather than using a third-party one. Instructions were purely in Chinese, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out how to get it mounted on, even for a Chinese illiterate like myself. If I had any complaints though about the installation process, it would probably be that the threading for these screws weren't really done well, requiring me to pre-thread them prior to actually installing it for a much easier time later. This was true for the threads to install the fans onto the radiator and to mount the radiator onto the case. I suggest also doing several trial runs onto how to install the pump head, as it's just a little bit tricky to do so. I did mine by first pressing down the pump head on the CPU, then using my other hand, align the clips, then screwing it all on, all while keeping constant pressure on the block until it's fully fastened. As far as benchmarks go, here it is compared to other liquid coolers that I have tested before. On an overclocked Ryzen 5 1600 at 3.9 GHz at 1.35 volts, the Segotep Halo was able to sit idle at 23 Celsius and when fully stressed out, max at 61 Celsius. The most impressive part I think was that it managed to do all of this while remaining exceedingly quiet. I've got to say that all my preconceived notions that I had of this cooler from a looks and price standpoint were quickly dismissed when it was finally put into action. So how well does a $39 AIO stack up? Honestly, I'm tempted to call this one a gem in terms of price performance. Given its price, I'm sure some level of cost savings had to be done. For example, the tubings could have been of better build. The pump head, while doing its job really well, design-wise is okay, I guess, if you're into that sort of thing. The fans performed really well at low power with low noise and good static pressure levels, though I wouldn't run them any lower than that, and I really don't know how much they're saving by skipping on the 3-pin notched 4-pin PWM headers. But overall, if the economy is stretching you thin and if you can't spare $80 to get yourself a nice AIO without starving for a week, then I can fully recommend this cooler, and maybe with this, you only need to starve for half a week. It really goes to show that you can't judge something by its look or cost, as it just may be able to hit well above its belt. So at $39, this cooler packs incredible value, but I'm still just a little bit sad, as this is the second cooler I tested that wasn't able to dethrone my 6-year-old 120mm Thermotake Water 2.0 Performer. You can give up on some build issues and a look that is love or hate. I would call it the best definition of performance per dollar. Definitely a recommended product for me, given its price. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like. If you didn't, then give it a dislike or drop a comment down below. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified for when new videos go live. My name is Yang, aka Tech Rodent, and thank you so much for watching.